Sometimes, the quietest moments carry the loudest truths. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just watched, listened, and finally did what no one expected. Looking back, that was the moment everything started to change, not for them, but for me. I guess you could say I've always been the reliable one. The guy who's single, no kids, decent job, keeps to himself. So naturally, I became the unofficial bank for my family. My older brother, Mark, is married with a kid, my nephew Liam. They've had a rough go financially over the years. Job instability, unexpected bills, that sort of thing. I've never minded helping out, not really. I love Liam. He's a good kid. Doesn't deserve to go without just because his parents made poor life decisions. So I stepped in, paid for school supplies, took him to the movies, bought him new clothes when I noticed his were getting too small or worn, even paid for soccer camp one summer. Our parents always acted like it was the most natural thing in the world. Of course you'd help, my mom would say. You don't have a family of your own. What else is your money for? My dad would grunt in agreement, like that was the end of the discussion. And Mark? He'd thank me, occasionally, with the same tone you'd use when someone passes you a napkin. Expected. Routine. I didn't think much of it at first. They were family. That's what you do, right? But that was before the birthday party. Liam was turning 10 that year. Double digits, a milestone. A big deal for any kid. I wanted to make it special, something he'd remember. I'd saved up and bought him a brand new Nintendo Switch, plus 2 games I knew he'd love. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't mind. I still remember the Christmas I got my first console, the way I practically exploded with excitement. That kind of joy sticks with you, and I wanted Liam to have that memory too. The party was at Mark and Michelle's place. Nothing extravagant, just a backyard barbecue with a dozen screaming kids, a soccer ball-shaped cake, and a playlist of children's songs on loop. Parents stood around with paper plates, pretending to enjoy undercooked burgers while checking their phones. I stood quietly near the drink cooler, gift bag in hand, just waiting for the right time. When it was time to open presents, Liam dug into the pile like a tornado. A few t-shirts, a couple of toys, some soccer stuff. Then he got to mine. His eyes widened when he pulled out the box, and when he saw what it was, he gasped. I saw it, that pure excitement. His whole face lit up like a fireworks show. No way, he shouted. A Switch. With games. It made my heart swell. For a second, it really did feel worth it. Until Mark opened his mouth. Well, look at Uncle ATM, he called out, smirking. Feeling guilty or something. That's it. Just the basic one. No extra controllers? A few people chuckled. One dad even muttered, savage, under his breath. I let out a dry, awkward laugh, trying to act like it was no big deal, but something inside me cracked right then and there. I looked over at my parents. I expected my mom to shoot Mark a disapproving look, maybe tell him to stop. I expected my dad to at least look uncomfortable. But no, my mom just smiled like it was an inside joke. My dad kept chewing his hot dog, completely unfazed. No one said a word. No one had my back. The party carried on like nothing happened. Cake, games, group photos. But I was somewhere else entirely. Numb, detached, staring at everyone through a thick pane of invisible glass. Later, I drove home with a fake smile frozen on my face and a sick feeling in my chest. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and, for the first time in years, let myself really ask the question I had been too afraid to face. Was I just the family wallet? After that party, something shifted in me, not all at once, but subtly, like the slow turning of a tide. I started noticing things I hadn't allowed myself to notice before. Not just what people said, but how they said it. The tone, the timing, the way their voices changed when they needed something, the way they disappeared when they didn't. It was almost embarrassing how obvious the pattern was once I started paying attention. Mark only reached out when there was a bill looming or when Liam needed something for school. No casual chats. No, how's your week been? Just straight to the point. And there was always a guilt trip folded in, subtle, but intentional. Hey, man, I hate to ask again, but Liam's gonna feel awful if he's the only one without new cleats for tryouts. Or, we'd love to take him to the museum this weekend, but money's tight, you know? My parents weren't any better. My mom had this well-practiced tone, part soft guilt, part passive pressure. You know, Mark's really doing his best. He's got a family, a lot of responsibilities. You're lucky you don't have all that stress. As if being single meant I was living in a luxury hotel, swimming in free time and extra money. My dad didn't say much, but when he did, it was always the same line. You're the only one we can count on. Not ask, count on. Like I was the backup generator, the default, the obligation. And the worst part? No one ever asked about me. Not once had they checked in on my job, my health, my goals, or whether I was lonely. No one ever asked if I wanted kids, or if I ever thought about marriage, or how I was really doing. They didn't even know my dog died last year. 13 years old. She was my only real companion, gone. And not a single person noticed I was grieving. It was like I didn't exist beyond what I could offer. I kept helping, mostly because I loved Liam, and the kid didn't ask to be born into that family dynamic. But every favor, every ignored birthday, every one-sided conversation started adding weight to something in my chest. A pressure, a quiet storm brewing behind my ribs. And the worst part? None of them had the faintest clue it was coming. A few months after Liam's birthday party, I started feeling off. It crept up slowly. First, it was just fatigue. I figured it was burnout. Work had been hectic, deadlines piling up, and between trying to be the dependable one for everyone else and managing my own life, I was running on fumes. My sleep got worse. I was constantly tired, no matter how much I rested. My appetite dropped. I chalked it all up to stress, nothing new. But then I collapsed. It happened during a morning meeting at the office. I stood up to speak, felt the room tilt, and the next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed, wires on my chest, four in my arm, and a monitor beeping like a ticking clock beside me. Confused, disoriented. My nurse told me I was lucky. Turned out I had a serious autoimmune condition that had gone undiagnosed for years. My immune system had quietly turned against me, attacking my own organs. One of my kidneys was already damaged. The doctor said if I'd waited a few more weeks, things could have taken a much darker turn. They kept me for monitoring and treatment, 7 days in total. 7 days to lie there and think about my life, how I'd ended up this drained, this alone, this invisible. And in those 7 days, not one family member reached out. No one checked in. No, hey, haven't heard from you. Everything okay? Not a single call, not even a text. Until day 4. My phone buzzed. It was my mom. For a brief moment, I felt something. Hope, maybe? But the message read, "Hi, sweetheart. Can you transfer $150? Mark's car needs repairs and they're tight again. Love you." That was it. No, where have you been? No, are you all right? Just money. 2 hours later, Mark chimed in. Hey, you good? Kinda need that cash soon if possible. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Not from illness this time, but realization. I wasn't a son. I wasn't a brother. I was a wallet with a heartbeat. Something in me cracked, but it wasn't rage. Not yet. It was clarity, cold and sharp. For the first time in my life, I truly understood what I meant to them, and what I didn't. When I was discharged from the hospital, I didn't tell anyone. I just went home. No calls, no texts, no explanations. I went silent. For the first time in my life, I ignored every message from my family. I didn't respond to my mom's passive-aggressive, "Are you too busy to even check in?" text. I didn't answer when Mark called 3 times in one day. And when my dad finally chimed in with, "Your brother's struggling. You need to step up," I just put my phone face down and let it ring. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I was finally protecting myself. Meanwhile, my medical bills were piling up, and I couldn't afford to throw money around anymore. Not that I planned to. But what got me wasn't that I couldn't help them. It's that they never asked if I was okay. They still hadn't noticed I'd been in the hospital. All they saw was a broken ATM. After 2 weeks of silence, Mark showed up at my apartment. He didn't ask how I was doing. He didn't say he was worried. He stood in my doorway and said, "Are you seriously ghosting us because I asked for car money?" That was it. That was the moment I realized. He genuinely couldn't see what was wrong. And worse, he didn't care to. I could feel the pressure building in my chest again, but this time it wasn't illness. It was anger. The quiet, calculated kind. I let Mark into my apartment. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to hear it for myself. Needed to be absolutely sure I wasn't imagining things. He sat on my couch like he owned it. No small talk. No, "Hey, you've been quiet, everything okay?" He just launched into his pitch. "Look, man, I know things are tight, but Liam needs new gear for soccer. And Michelle's been sick again, so we're behind on bills. Can you just help this one time?" I'll pay you back, I swear. I stared at him, dead silent. Then I asked, calmly, do you know where I was last week? He blinked. What? I said, do you know where I was? He looked confused, then annoyed. What does that have to do with? I was in the hospital, Mark. I collapsed. Doctors say I almost lost my kidney function. I've got an autoimmune disease. I've got months of treatment ahead of me and a pile of bills. His mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. And not one of you noticed. You didn't call. You didn't ask. All you cared about was why the money stopped flowing. He scoffed. Scoffed. Come on, man. Don't make it a guilt thing. You're always fine. You've always bounced back. We've got real problems too. And that was it. I didn't yell. I didn't throw him out. I just nodded and said, got it. Thanks for being honest. In that moment, I knew. There would be no apology. No understanding. No change. So I started planning. Not to scream. Not to beg for appreciation. But to teach them all what it really meant when I wasn't there. Not just my money. Me. After Mark left that day, I didn't feel rage. Not the kind that makes you slam doors or yell into pillows. What I felt was a chilling calm. The kind that comes after a storm has passed, but you're standing in the ruins it left behind. It was almost too calm, like the quiet you hear right before an avalanche. There's a special kind of clarity that hits you when you finally accept the truth. You've been nothing more than a transaction in the lives of people who were supposed to love you. Not a son, not a brother, not even a person, really. Just a reliable bank account with a friendly smile. And once that truth settles in, something inside shifts permanently. You stop expecting apologies. You stop waiting for the phone to ring. You stop checking your messages, hoping maybe, just maybe, someone will ask if you're okay. Instead, you start taking mental notes, keeping receipts. Not literal ones, emotional ones. I remembered every time I'd stepped up, even when it hurt. Every favor done without a thank you. Every missed birthday of mine. Every fake, love you, text attached to a money request. Every time they forgot I existed until they needed something. So I disappeared. No dramatic farewell, no confrontation. I just stopped. No texts. No calls. No family dinners. I muted the group chat. Then quietly left the family WhatsApp group without so much as a wave emoji. No one noticed for days. But silence wasn't the revenge. Subtraction was. Behind the scenes, I began unraveling everything I'd built for them. Slowly, methodically, not out of anger, but out of necessity. A lesson was coming, and it wasn't one I could teach with words. They wouldn't listen anyway. First to go were the auto payments I'd set up long ago, monthly transfers for Liam's tutoring, soccer dues, and other expenses they'd stopped even pretending to acknowledge. That magic money they relied on just disappeared. Then the prepaid debit card I'd kept refilling just in case Mark or Michelle ran into another emergency. I cut it off, quietly, without warning. I even reached out to Liam's soccer league, removed myself as the listed sponsor and emergency contact. I didn't cancel anything. I just let the unpaid bills start speaking for me. And then I waited. Not out of pettiness, but out of cold, earned patience. It didn't take long. It took exactly 3 weeks. First came a message from Michelle, Mark's wife, something about how the soccer league was being weird and saying Liam's club dues were overdue. I ignored it. Then came my mom, texting me. Did you forget to send Liam's tutoring payment? He got a warning about being dropped. I didn't answer. Within a few days, Mark called. And for the first time in years, he sounded worried. Hey man, weird question. Did you cancel the tutoring payments? Liam's coach says something bounced, and Michelle swears you were covering that. I waited a moment. Then I said, nope, I didn't cancel anything. I just stopped paying for things I was never thanked for. There was a long pause. Wait, what? You can't just stop. What's Liam supposed to do? I stayed calm. Liam is your son, not mine. You're seriously going to let him suffer just to prove a point? I didn't answer that. I didn't need to. He knew exactly what the point was. He just didn't like that someone else was finally drawing a line. By the end of the week, the dominoes really started falling. My parents called me, for once, both of them. My dad led with his usual passive-aggressive growl. This isn't like you. Your brother's family is under a lot of pressure. You can't just disappear. Oh, I didn't disappear, I said. I was just gone long enough to see how fast you all forget I exist when you don't need something. Then came the emotional blackmail. We're family. You don't turn your back on family. That one stung, for a second. until I remembered how they'd turned their backs on me the moment I became inconvenient. That's when I realized they didn't want me back. They wanted the money. A week later, my mom called and asked if we could all meet. Her, my dad, Mark, and me. Face to face. Like a family, she said. I agreed. We met at their house on a Sunday afternoon. The same house where I'd spent birthdays, Thanksgivings, Christmases. The same place where I had always shown up with gifts, food, or help, and left with nothing more than a "see you next time." I walked in and immediately felt the tension. Mark sat on one side of the room with his arms crossed. My dad stood by the window like some disappointed general. My mom had that nervous smile she wore when trying to keep peace, or appearances. She started. "We've all been confused, honestly. Worried. You've always been so generous, and now everything's just changed." I looked at her. "It didn't change. You just didn't notice how bad it already was." Mark cut in. "So what? This is revenge. Punishing Liam because you're having a midlife crisis?" That one hit harder than he probably intended, or maybe he meant it to. I turned to him slowly. "Do you even know what autoimmune disease I have?" Silence. I looked at my parents. "Do either of you know?" "I told you. You didn't ask." "Not once." More silence. "You all cared when I was useful, when the checks cleared, when Liam had what he needed and you didn't have to worry. But the second I needed something, anything, I was met with silence. You didn't lose me when I stopped paying. You lost me when you proved I didn't matter unless I was paying." My dad finally spoke. "You're overreacting." I laughed. "You're right. I should have stopped years ago." Then I stood up and said the one sentence I'd never imagined myself saying in that house. "I'm not your provider anymore." And I walked out. I didn't hear from any of them for 2 weeks. Then, the texts started again, this time from Michelle. They were frantic, not accusatory. She said Liam was heartbroken that he couldn't go to soccer, that he didn't understand why Uncle had suddenly vanished from his life. She begged me to reconsider. I almost cracked. Almost. But I knew what this was. The same playbook with a new cover. Guilt dressed up as love. And as much as I cared about Liam, I knew this wasn't my mess to clean up anymore. If I gave in now, the cycle would start again. So I wrote back. "I love Liam, but I will not keep playing the role of father, sponsor, or savior. That's Mark's job, and it's time he did it." She didn't respond. A few days later, I got a call from Liam's school. Apparently, I had been listed, without my permission, as a financial guarantor on several of his activity fees. When the payments failed, they tried to contact me. That was the final straw. I hired a lawyer. Quietly, cleanly. I had my name removed from every informal and formal obligation I never agreed to. Every auto debit, every form, every forgotten commitment I'd been roped into. I made it legally impossible for them to tie me back into their finances. And once that was done, I moved. Not far, but far enough. New place, unlisted number, new boundaries. I left no forwarding address. They weren't just cut off from my money now. They were cut off from me. You'd think that after all this, my family would finally get the message, right? That they'd reflect, feel some shame, maybe even reach out sincerely to rebuild what they broke. Nope. Instead, the story took a strange turn. A couple of months after I moved, I started hearing things through mutual friends. Rumors, really. Apparently, Mark and my parents had been talking about me behind my back, saying I was cold, ungrateful, even the problem in the family. That I was using my illness as an excuse to avoid responsibilities. What shocked me was how everyone seemed to believe them. Friends I thought I could trust distanced themselves. Invitations stopped coming. Social media posts from family events carefully excluded me. I realized something. By standing up for myself, I'd become the villain. But here's the kicker. Despite all the drama, despite painting me as the bad guy, none of them ever admitted to treating me like a human being in the first place. The most painful part? Liam, my nephew, who never understood any of this, was caught in the middle, left wondering why his uncle disappeared. I wanted to explain, but every time I tried, Mark or Michelle shut me down. So, I kept my distance. Not out of hate, but out of self-preservation. Sometimes, the people you love don't know how to love you back. After months of silence and distance, I realized that the only person I could truly count on was myself. I started focusing on my health, doctor's appointments, treatments, therapy. I learned to say no without guilt. I surrounded myself with people who actually cared, not just those who needed something. It wasn't easy. Sometimes I'd feel lonely, especially when I thought about Liam. But I had to accept that I couldn't fix everyone, and that some wounds run too deep for apologies or explanations. I found new hobbies, joined a support group for people with chronic illnesses, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Helping animals gave me a sense of purpose without strings attached. Most importantly, I learned to set boundaries, hard ones. Boundaries that said, I am not your ATM. I am not your doormat. I wish I could say my family saw the error of their ways and changed. But they didn't. And that's okay. Sometimes, love isn't enough. Sometimes, self-respect has to come first. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to get trapped in the idea of what family should be. Always forgiving, always giving, always connected. But reality isn't a fairy tale. My experience taught me that love isn't about sacrifice without respect. It's not about giving until you're empty and being taken for granted. It's about balance. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do is to walk away from people who don't value you, even if they share your blood. I've also learned that revenge isn't about making people suffer. It's about reclaiming your own power. My revenge was not paying their bills, not being their emergency fund, and ultimately, choosing myself over their selfishness. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was effective. And it was necessary. A few months ago, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From my mom. It was short. No apology. Just a vague line about how things have been hard and how they hoped I was doing better. At the end, she added, Liam misses you. That was the only part that felt real. I didn't reply. It wasn't out of cruelty. It was because I knew, deep down, that if I opened the door even an inch, the flood would return. The guilt trips, the requests, the entitlement. And I wasn't going back to that life. I'd changed. They hadn't. The hardest pill for them to swallow was this. They lost access not just to my bank account, but to my loyalty, my care, my time, my presence. And I was done handing those things out to people who never valued them. I'm not sure if Mark and his family ever understood what really happened. From what I hear, they still think I'm selfish, cold, unreasonable. Let them. That's the price of standing up for yourself in a family that only loves what you give. If you've made it this far, maybe you see yourself in me. Maybe you're the one always picking up the pieces, always saying yes when you're already stretched thin, always giving because no one else will, and being met with silence when you finally need help. Let me say this clearly. You are not selfish for setting boundaries. You are not cold for expecting basic decency and gratitude. You are not a villain for walking away from people who use you. What I learned, the hard way, is that love without respect isn't love. It's dependency. And if the only time they remember you exist is when they need something, they don't love you. They rely on you. And when you remove yourself from that equation, their world might shake. They might lash out. They might call you names, twist the story, play the victim. Let them. Because peace, real peace, doesn't come from keeping everyone else happy. It comes from finally choosing yourself. That's what I did. And I don't regret it for a second.